There is a specific type of person who can perfectly recall the exact emotional tone of a conversation they had in a dimly lit kitchen 3 years ago. Not the genuinely aloof narcissist who doesn't care about others. Not the careless extrovert who talks over people and refuses to listen. I am talking about the hyper-observant person who remembers that a stranger's rescue dog is allergic to poultry, who notices the slight hesitation in someone's voice when they mention their father, but who absolutely cannot retrieve that stranger's actual first name 3 seconds after shaking their hand. You are standing there holding a lukewarm drink, nodding along to their story, and the name is simply gone. It has vanished so cleanly, it feels like it was never spoken in the first place, leaving you frantically mapping out an elaborate escape plan, angling your body toward the door, subtly checking their Starbucks cup for a Sharpie scrawl, or executing that designated rescue protocol where you squeeze your partner's arm so they know to introduce themselves first. You probably think you have a fundamentally broken memory. You do not. Psychologists actually call this the Baker-Baker paradox. Back in 1987, researchers Gillian McQueenie and Andrew Ellis proved that human brains are notoriously hostile to proper names. They showed people a photograph of a man. They told half the room the man worked as a baker, and they told the other half the man's last name was Baker. When tested days later, the people who were told his profession remembered it almost perfectly, while the people who were told his name drew a complete, staggering blank. Same exact word. Completely different neurological destiny. When you hear that someone is a baker, your brain lights up a semantic network. A semantic network is an invisible spiderweb in your mind, where concepts are glued to sensory details. You immediately picture flour dusting a wooden table, the smell of yeast, early morning alarms, warmth, bread. You have a massive pre-existing file folder to drop this information into. But when someone says, "Hi, I'm Baker," or "Hi, I'm Dave," it means absolutely nothing. Dave is a meaningless piece of audio. Dave is an administrative label disconnected from any sensory reality, hovering in a void inside a brain that is frankly too exhausted to build a new filing cabinet for a single syllable. Think back to the world you grew up in before your brain was forced to process an endless parade of transient, disconnected faces. Think about the year 1999. You knew exactly where the sci-fi movies were in your local Blockbuster because you walked past the blue carpet, turned left at the cardboard standee, and went to the bottom shelf on the right. You knew exactly what the physical, satisfying snap of a silver Motorola Razr felt like when you angrily ended a call in 2004. You can still hear the exact pitch and harmony of the $5 foot-long Subway jingle from 2008. Your formative memory was entirely spatial, deeply contextual, and heavily anchored in sensory association. You were trained to remember the environment, the feeling, the music, the physical weight of a thing. Then, adulthood arrived, and suddenly you were standing in a fluorescent-lit conference room. A stranger in a blue shirt approaches you, extends a hand, and expects you to permanently log an isolated rootless data point in a vacuum. 6. That is the exact number of social variables your prefrontal cortex is desperately juggling when you meet someone new. Your prefrontal cortex is the brain's tiny, short-term whiteboard. In that brief window, you are calculating their tone of voice, assessing their body language, checking your own posture, wondering if your handshake is too aggressively firm, trying to figure out if they actually want to talk to you, and frantically planning your next conversational move. Right into the center of that cognitive hurricane, they toss a tiny, weightless paper airplane called Dave. The paper airplane gets shredded in the storm. You are actively experiencing the next in line effect. First documented in 1973 by psychologist Malcolm Brenner, This phenomenon explains why people waiting to speak in a circle remember absolutely nothing about what the person immediately before them just said. Your brain cannot encode new external information, while it is simultaneously rehearsing its own internal performance. You are internally narrating. You are editing yourself in real time. People with high social anxiety, or even just hyper-vigilant empathy, are perpetually stuck in this next-in-line holding pattern, constantly scanning the social environment to make sure everyone is comfortable. The irony is staggering. You miss the name entirely because you are trying entirely too hard to be a good, attentive person in their presence. If this hits uncomfortably close to home, here is the absolute truth. You do not have a memory problem. You have a preoccupation problem. But we cannot talk about the mechanics of this without acknowledging the collateral damage, because the emotional fallout of this is incredibly real. This is the dark side. Having your name forgotten hurts. It lands on the other person like a quiet, sharp indictment of their own significance. When you stare blankly at a coworker you have met 3 times, or when you default to calling someone man or buddy for the 5th conversation in a row, the message they receive is devastatingly simple. I did not matter enough to you. That is how it feels in their chest, even if it is completely scientifically inaccurate. The human brain does not consult academic journals when its feelings are hurt. The other person walks away feeling small, and you are left standing there drowning in a very specific, quiet shame spiral, convinced you are a self-absorbed sociopath who moves through the world treating people like background extras. It feels incredibly isolating. You punish yourself for being so arrogant, so disconnected. But you are not disconnected. You are actually overconnected to the wrong frequency. People who chronically drop names usually share a brilliant, hidden architecture. You are an associative thinker. You do not store the world like a hard drive dropping text documents into neatly labeled folders. You store the world like a painter. Your memory prioritizes ruthlessly. High emotion, stored immediately. A subtle shift in someone's facial expression when they felt misunderstood. Cataloged forever. An interesting observation they made about their complicated relationship with their brother. Engraved in stone. You prioritize the metadata of a human being. You remember the metadata. You threw away the file name. This is not a flaw in your mind's design. It is a highly specific, deeply human calibration. You are running an entirely different neurological operating system, one that is perfectly optimized for emotional attunement, for deep storytelling, and for the kind of fierce, active listening that makes people feel genuinely understood in the dark hours of their lives. It just happens to be spectacularly bad at the mechanical task of retaining arbitrary audio tags under social pressure. Now, none of this absolves you from trying to bridge the gap. You absolutely must force the manual override. When you meet someone, say their name back to them out loud instantly. Ask them a question that forces you to use the name in a sentence. Anchor their name to a ridiculous visual image in your head, or map it onto a celebrity. You have to actively build the web. You have to do manually what your brain stubbornly refuses to do automatically, because other people's feelings do actually matter, and learning to hold on to a name is a basic act of social hospitality. But you must let go of the underlying guilt. You have to stop believing that your blank slate in the first 3 seconds of an introduction is a reflection of your moral character. You are not careless. You are not aloof. You are a person whose brain gets hijacked by its own profound desire to read the room. Someone who gets so lost in the intricate, breathing reality of the person standing in front of them that you drop the single least interesting thing about them. You drop the arbitrary, meaningless sound their parents assigned them decades before they had done a single beautiful thing worth remembering. The name was always a distraction. What you actually remember about them The heavy, lingering texture of who they really are beneath the label. That is the part that matters, and that is the part you never forget. If you are the kind of person who wants to understand the invisible wiring behind why we do the things we do, I highly recommend sending this to that one partner or friend who always has to jump in and save you at parties. Let them know it is science. And if you are looking to dig deeper into the strange, brilliant architecture of the human mind, I've put together a curated list of psychology books that explain exactly how our brains betray us and protect us. You can find that list on my bookshop page, linked right below in the description. Subscribe if this resonated with you, and I will see you in the next one.